Victim coming out, victim coming out.
The fireground is dynamic. Priorities can change by the second. This series is about our first priority, life priority. We'll hear from the firefighters that have made a grab in live fire conditions, the decisions they made and the lessons they learned. Listen as they tell you about their experience, learn from their mistakes and their successes. Expect fire and expect victims. Expect the unexpected and plan accordingly. This is Life Priority.
We were up to some 21 hijinks that night, and we were all up pretty late doing some stuff out back. And a structure fire call came in, and we knew it was really close. What we didn't realize, it was right next door until Jaden Fitz recognized the apartments. It's only 4-digit apartment numbers we have in our entire first in. So we were up and out of the station within seconds because we were already awake, so there was no wake-up time. And when we got around the corner, you could see the fire coming out of the Alpha and the Alpha side of the apartment, of these Alco-style apartment. Fire was blowing out the front door and out of the living room sliding door. Gave the arrival report, you know, had the rescue pulling in behind us.
We got there, we decided to go all up. We had pretty heavy fire conditions. It had the ability to make a run.
Tyler and I already pre-planned this. We were gonna go and with this one, just to make sure, since we're all up to have enough ladder, we were gonna throw a 2-person ladder.
So Johnny and I were already in motion. Hey, victim's over here on the balcony. Threw the ladder, just ran up real quick, told them to drop all their stuff. They were trying to yard all their gear out.
Got those 2 people down, and then immediately we had extended that 20 up to go for ventilation.
What I failed to hear was the fact that there was still a kid being reported as still stuck in the apartment by his father. The engineer and everybody on the apartment side of the engine got that report. I didn't get it on the captain's side. So I helped Cody Powers stretch the line.
How we had to position ended up doing an offside pull, so I pulled the cross-lay dead load with 100 feet, ended up getting it offside, stretched it over to the stairwell. From that point, I could see his Alco-style apartment with heavy fire from the front door of the apartment as well as the slider off of the living room. So I started setting up there, ended up having too much heat, so I had to reposition the hose line back so I could mask up.
And at some point I started hearing some mumblings about people being trapped. And when I looked up on the adjoining apartment from the balcony, you could see 2 people out their slider waving frantically to be picked. So I kind of thought that was who they were talking about still being stuck. So I grabbed the 21 rescue crew that was coming by with the ladder for ventilation and pointed out the people that needed to be evacuated. And they went to work on that. So Powers had his line charged pretty quickly. He knocked down the fire, got inside. I was in right behind him, but I knew that the victims or the people next door were still being evacuated. So I knew the truck was going to be delayed on doing their primary search. So I split off the hose line and did a search off the hose line and headed down the hallway.
Do we have an officer in that apartment? There's an 8-year-old in there?
It's an 800 square foot apartment that we've gone into hundreds of times for medical aids in that complex. I knew the layout. I started a left-hand search down the hallway, got into the first bedroom, doing the search, checking the mattress. I went to go flip the mattress up to look under the bed real fast. When I put my hand down to brace myself, I put it right down on the child that was still in the apartment. I didn't know there was still a child there. And so it just took me a second to process the fact that, hey, this is a kid. This doesn't feel like a blanket or a stuffed animal, you know, that was a kid. So when I started grabbing him, I just grabbed him and threw up on my shoulder. I knew I had 3 or 4 big steps to get out the front door. So I grabbed him, threw him on my shoulder, and I started bounding for the door. And on my way out, I called the traffic into command that I had found somebody.
CHPD reports us an 8-year-old in the far bedroom.
At the ladders at this point, I need you to also complete primary search if possible in the apartment on the Alpha side of the apartment involved.
Made it to the stairwell. I was breathing so heavy, you know, with everything going on that I fogged my mask up.
They're coming out? Back up. They're coming out with something? Coming, out of the way. Only one? Victim coming out to the command post. We're going to need a medic at the command post.
Copy that. We have a medic.
I got down to the bottom of the stairs and I couldn't see anything from that point, so I ended up handing the kid off to, I believe it was Sean Scollard. And Scollard ran him over to the medic unit where Matt Carlson and Sean and James Doyle grabbed him and got out of there. You know, they had to play ping pong against some cars to get off the street to get into the hospital. You know, I got lucky. I wasn't expecting to find anybody, and so just that second to process, you know, you always should expect to find someone, but just putting your hand on something different that, you know, when it's your first time putting your hand on a person in a body, it just wasn't what I'd never been trained to fill a body before in a fire. You know, you expect a hard mannequin or a hose, something, but a person feels different. And it's just the first time you actually touch on a fire, it wasn't what I was expecting, right? I just had to process it. You know, you can't rely on your ticks. You know, I lost the battery on that once that thing was gone. It was worthless to me at that point. And we found it in the flower bed after the fire was over. By the time I handed the kid off, made sure he was being taken care of, I turned around to go back to finish the search. Truck 23 had come in and they had started a search also, and they had completed a full primary. I kind of meandered my way back through just to make sure nothing got missed, you know, for my own sake of mind. And then I came back outside. It went well. You know, we evacuated the neighbors out of their apartment real fast. We evacuated the child real fast, you know, and he had a full recovery from it, and Powers had the fire out quickly. It went as well as could be expected. You know, luckily we were all up. We knew right where to go, so it was like a bang bang play. We were there real fast. Yeah, the fire conditions when we arrived at the scene, we had fire at that point coming out of the door of the apartment, fire coming out of the slider unit, you know, onto the balcony, and then we had smoke coming out of the master bedroom at the end of the hallway on the Bravo side of the building where the father had eventually jumped out of. He had made his way around to the front door and had basically kicked the front door in before PD had stopped him to go back and look for his child. So he jumped out of the window, broke his ankle, limped his way to the front door, had grabbed an extinguisher on his way and was going to try to put the fire out himself. He had lost his kid, and so he'd had him at one point when they were trying to get out of the apartment, and then his kid freaked out and left his hands, and the dad couldn't find him in all the smoke. So his dad's next thought was he'd put the fire out and find him that way. And so the door got left open. When PD grabbed him before he could go in, they didn't close the door. They didn't know to close the door, and they left it open. So we had fire coming out the door. Fire had burned out through the slider at that point and broken the slider, and we had smoke coming out of the master bedroom. The conditions afterwards, so when Cody got his knock on the fire, the visibility inside the apartment was super low, and that's why, you know, I had fired the tick up to see if I could use it to help me, because there was essentially no visibility in the apartment at that point. So it didn't work, so that, you know, I'm not going to waste my time with the tick if it doesn't work. So I started the search then. When I found him in that bedroom, the door was 3/4 of the way closed, maybe a little more, 7/8 closed. It was just barely cracked. And so it was a little better visibility in there when you were down on your knees. If you were duck walking, I think you would have been too high to see anything. But when I was down on my knees to go flip the mattress, when I put my hand on him, and then you realized what it was on, I could start to make it out. He was so covered in soot from the fire that it didn't look like a child the way he was balled up. But once you put your hand on it, and you realize, okay, I think I'm touching somebody, and now I see the outlines. Okay, this is in fact a victim. So that's when I grabbed and went out. So the heat, I don't remember. In the bedroom, if there was a lot of heat, there was a lot of heat in the living room. You know, by that point, I knew the fire was out, and my best bet for getting him out was just to grab him and run. You know, and the time to throw a ladder to the window when I only had to take 5 steps to get out of the apartment, I wasn't going to waste time for a ladder to get thrown.
But can you run me through, let's call it the obstacles that were in the way of that medic crew trying to go to the hospital and your memory of that event?
Being that I had already kind of gone back in, you know, this is going to be secondhand information. But they had ran the child to the medic unit, got him in. He wasn't breathing at that point, so they started, you know, CPR, trying to get an airway established. Where the medic had pulled in, there was only one way in and out of this apartment complex, and it wasn't we had a newer probationary firefighter and another firefighter who didn't really know the area. It wasn't his first in. And so when they pulled in behind us, they decided at this T intersection to go left and not follow us to the right. Well, but the only way back out was there. The hydrant was at that entrance to the apartment complex. So when the next engine laid in line, it blocked the exit. That hydrant line, the LDH became separated from the hydrant, allowing the ambulance to drive out. They were going to have to hop over the LDH. It came off for other reasons, and so they were able to drive out. Doyle, not knowing the area, knew that Greenback was the left and that was the fastest way. And there was a small alleyway, and he knew his only way to get to the hospital was that way. With the kid not breathing, he chose to go with that plan. And so he forced the medic down the road, I think hit a couple mirrors with cop cars and maybe put a couple dents in some mirrors, but it was the only way he knew. He didn't know any other way. He didn't have time to map it. He was making a spur this, second decision on which way to go. And so he headed to the left, got him to the hospital, and they were able to, I believe they had pulses back before they got to the hospital. So it was the only option at the time.
That was my first big fire actually in the nozzle seat. So I was normally assigned to Medic 21. I was on the engine for that day. Thought I was far enough away when I stretched the line. It ended up being a pretty easy stretch. And I thought the base of the stairs being about 30 feet away was good, but I could not mask up at that point. So having to reposition the hose line back some in order to mask up ended up wasting some time. So I think maybe setting up a little further out at a little bit better of an angle would have sped up the operation overall. That was one of the big ones. I ended up getting water on the alcove, which kind of opened that up. And we had victims in the adjacent apartment complex that couldn't get out. So they ended up getting assisted off the balcony. So I could have put a little bit more water that direction before actually hitting the seat of the fire to kind of basically create a space for them. So that was my two big learning points on that. And then that's gonna be no visibility in high heat. And you have to kind of feel for the heat to actually apply water. So that was the biggest things I learned on that. And to relay that there's a victim.
It was definitely a proud moment for that crew. We worked pretty hard training and stuff. But even when you train, stuff goes wrong. Fitzy had a pump issue. We had LDH was lost on that one. So a bunch of little things happened. Middle of the night fire, just not a lot of good intel on scene.
Short of, actually having someone lay down in a real fire, the first time I think you grab someone, that's going to be a new experience, because how do you train for that? So grabbing that person for the first time, it's a new experience. And once you've done it once, I'm sure you're never going to forget it. We just got to move into that mindset that we're always expecting victims on these fires, and it's no longer an unexpected event.
That was my first time ever even assisting someone down a ladder. It was evident to me that they were pretty scrambled up. They were like early 20s, late teens. They were definitely freaking out, as you'd imagine. Their slider was cracked open and their apartment was filling with smoke. They were not going to be able to go back in there and be, it was definitely turned into IDLH. Their door was given. Their front door was taking heavy fire. And Cody had just started knocking the heck out of that breezeway. So one thing I learned once the ladder went up, it was clear that they weren't going to just start coming down the ladder. So I had to go up and physically remove this stuff from their hands, throw it down, and some expletives were said, like, we are going down this ladder. And something I kind of learned that we kind of teach is sometimes you have to physically grab that person, grab their leg, and stick it on the rung and show them how this is going to look, right? Plus you had this 28, so we were super steep, or not steep, really, really shallow angle, which didn't really help our cause. It just made it more difficult for everybody involved.
Don't forget the basics on searches. I train and study on the tick use, and I go to a fire and the first thing that happens is the battery falls out. Or like on this Auburn Boulevard fire, the tick got a little bit of water in it and it fried out right away. So if you're relying on technology is going to fail us. It can be super helpful, but it can fail us when we need it too. So don't forget the basics. Not everybody gets to carry a large tick, but we all have the situational awareness ticks now with the Seeks. If that becomes your primary mode of search, it's just going to lead to problems. So you got to know the basics. Train on it. Don't become complacent. So.
Great. Well, thanks for your willingness to sit down and chat with us. If there was somebody that was maybe watching this that had their own rescue, but maybe was a little more hesitant to speak up, is there anything that you'd like to maybe share with them or let them know, and in a way to encourage them to speak to us so that we can all get this information. You know, we don't all get to sit down and, you know, share a kitchen table with you and hear
Right.
this story. And, you know, I've worked with you over the years, but I've never really asked for the specific details of this. It's kind of a unique situation, and it's your situation, right?
Yeah, the
So-
same with you, right?
Right.
You had your grab, and you know I was on duty that day and missed that fire. We were down the street on a medical aid. How do we learn those things? You know, yeah, touching that person was, you know, I don't know how it felt for you that time, but it was different for me when I touched a real person. All those years of training, I never grabbed a real body in a real fire. You know,
Totally.
I wasn't a sensation I was expecting. So the more we share, the more everybody kind of shares these common themes, and we get that word out there, the more prepared someone's going to be for it, and they can make that decision faster on what they're going to do instead of trying to process, what is this? Is this really a hand? Is this a foot? Is this really happening to me? And do I have someone here? You know, because then your mind's going a mile a minute, and you're trying to process all that. And if we can cut down that processing time, you know, it'll make it better for us. So share it, you know, and then you know, write it down, or as you suggested, make a voice memo of it, and just talk it through the sequence of events, because it's been a couple years now and I haven't really talked about it, and so just some of the memories are coming back to me, you know, and I forgotten about little things. I had forgotten that Jaden knew right where to go just off the dispatch. Right, the first take on this, I'd forgotten the TIC battery had fallen out. You know, it's just, I didn't let it stop the operation, obviously, but you know, just little details you forget. So if you talk about it, you bring it up. Some of that, all that stuff helps, and you know, it helps get people in the right mindset down the road.
Perfect. I can't think of a better way to end. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Fire service is about tradition. One of our traditions is about passing on our experiences and our lessons learned. When we do this, the story doesn't focus on the individual, but the team and the outcome. These lessons are shared so that you can better serve the public and your fellow firefighters. If you have a rescue and you're hesitant to tell your story, remember, the lessons you share may help save someone else's life or your own. Share your story by contacting us at lifepriority@metrofire.ca.gov.